The grand chamber of strategic doctrine shimmered in the artificial sunlight of the Arcseni Prime, seat of the Galactic Council's military affairs. Walls of polished obsidian reflected the faces of gathered admirals, war scholars, and intelligence lords, some scaled, some feathered, some pulsating gently beneath exosuits. Holographic models of contested sectors flickered in midair, dotted with red excess and green circles. At the center floated one pale blue sphere. No defenses, no fleet, no planetary shield, no reason for alarm. General Bracken snorted through his twin snouts and jabbed a claw at the planet labeled Earth//SOL3. Gentle beings, I give you the galactic equivalent of an unguarded fruit, stand in the desert. This, Earth, a species so chaotic, they nearly wiped themselves out twice in a century using chemical sticks and flying ovens. No central government, no unified military, no interstellar reach. Yet still no one has taken it. He turned with theatrical flair. I ask why. Murmurs rippled. A cybernetic owl being swiveled its head in thought. A methane breather from Garn tapped a flipper against its translator pod. An aged voice, low and metallic, interrupted from the far end of the chamber. Because some fruit bites back. Every head turned. Leaning against a column like an ancient monument that had refused to fall over, stood the Zarisk war veteran. His chitin was dulled and cracked, half of his mandibles replaced with iron. One eye glowed faintly red, the other long gone. When he moved, the sound was not steps, it was weight choosing to shift. You're still alive? Bracken scoffed. Regrettably, Zarisk muttered. But long enough to keep you fools from waking the wrong sleeping giant. Laughter flared among the younger officers. One mocked a human accent. No, the mean little planet might throw a tantrum. The veteran's remaining eye narrowed. You ever wonder what happened to the Ilaxi fleet? He asked, his tone conversational, as if asking about the weather. Sent 5 dreadnoughts, 11 cruisers, and 32 interceptors to Earth space 90 years ago. Full armada, just to test the waters. They were destroyed by an anomaly, an officer replied dismissively. Yes, Zarisk said, voice like sand and static. The anomaly's name was Chicago. Before the laughter could resume, the chamber's door opened with a polite chime. A human entered. He wore a dark navy blazer with a faded NASA pin. His haircut was aggressively average. He held a ceramic mug with something steaming and smelled faintly of cinnamon. He smiled as if he had just walked into a PDA meeting and not the nerve center of an intergalactic war machine. Ambassador Jack Carson, representing Earth, he said, stepping into the room with the unhurried pace of a man who had never once in his life been surprised. Bracken's ridged brows lifted. You're Earth's representative? You. Well, Jack said with a shrug, my predecessor mysteriously exploded on his way here. So, I got promoted. Congratulations to me. He took a sip. Delicious. Try the cinnamon blend if you ever visit. Why are you here? Bracken growled. Oh, I heard you were planning to attack Earth. He smiled broadly. Thought I'd save everyone a lot of time and tears. A pause. Several beings glanced at Zarisk. Jack continued, casually strolling toward the holomap. We're flattered, really. It's cute, you know? You see a blue marble floating quietly. Little radio waves leaking out. No planetary shields. No fleet parked in orbit. Looks like a bite-sized target. He leaned in. But here's the fun part. It's not defenseless. Just uninterested in flexing. Bracken curled a lip. You don't even have FTL capabilities. Jack nodded agreeably. True. But we have rockets that can punch through moons. We don't visit often. Doesn't mean we can't send a parting gift. Snickers rippled. An insectoid general clicked her mandibles. Your people still die from colds. Jack turned to her, still smiling. And you still die from overestimating yourselves. Balance, really. He reached into his blazer and pulled out a slim data chip, tossing it lightly onto the central console. The holomap flickered. Dozens of clips rolled across the air. Footage of human combat zones, urban warfare, zero-gravity skirmishes, guerrilla ambushes. Then, darker images, of humans using weather patterns as weapons, redirecting orbital debris into enemy stations, deploying information warfare to convince enemy crews to defect. These are simulations? One admiral asked slowly. No, Jack replied. Those are playgrounds. Real wars are messier, less camera-friendly. Zarisk nodded grimly. He's not lying. We didn't lose to humans. We stopped showing up. Humans are short-lived and full of caffeine, Jack added cheerfully, which makes us fast learners and very, very twitchy. Bracken waved dismissively. We have civilizations older than your continents. Empires built from starfire. What could you possibly do? Jack took another sip of his drink. Ah, that's the spirit. Then, casually, we're not here to win wars, General. We're here to make you regret starting one. Silence followed. You think this is a threat? Bracken said at last. Jack grinned. No, I'm far too polite for that. Think of it as pre-apocalyptic customer service. He reached into his pocket again, pulling out a small black envelope. These, he said, are Earth's surrender terms. The laughter returned, now louder. Even Zarisk tilted his head. Surrender terms? Bracken repeated. From you? Yes, Jack said smoothly. You'll need them. After your first contact, fleet goes missing. Again. He placed the envelope on the table with care. Inside, suggestions for what to do when your colonies start experiencing accidental geological instability. Also includes dietary tips. I hear Zytharians get cranky when their fungus farms melt. A robotic being with 6 eyes rotated its head toward the council. He's bluffing. Jack shrugged. Oh, definitely. It's part of the charm. But bluffing only works when there's doubt. You're doubting, aren't you? No one spoke. Zarisk broke the tension. He talks like all humans do. Friendly. Disarming. Until you realize the house is on fire and you're tied to the furniture. Jack gave a humble bow. We do aim for hospitality. Bracken leaned in. What's your real play, human? Jack's eyes sparkled with amusement. Honestly, just wanted to see if you'd take the bait. And you did, with both claws. The general blinked. There is no bait. Oh, Jack said innocently. So that signal probe you launched toward Earth wasn't carrying a virus? Pity. Would have been a shame if someone traced the signal back here and possibly loaded it with consequences. Everyone turned to the central display as it glitched once. Just once. Zarisk, for the first time in a century, looked startled. Jack checked his watch. Huh. Right on schedule. Alarms flared in one corner of the chamber. A distant boom echoed through the walls. Ah, Jack said softly. There go your comms relays. How? Bracken barked. We just didn't patch your firmware. Rookie move. Jack sighed sympathetically. Should have hired a human teenager. We hacked boredom itself for fun. The chamber dissolved into ordered chaos, shouted commands, panicked encryption resets, override codes failing. Jack walked to the exit with unhurried steps. Anyway, this has been enlightening. I'll let Earth know we're still safe for now, assuming the Galactic Council can keep its admirals on a leash. Zarisk stared at him as he passed. Why are you really here? The veteran asked, not with suspicion, but quiet dread. Jack paused, one hand on the door. To make sure no one else tries something stupid, he said. Then added, as if it were an afterthought, also to see if you'd blink first. And with that, he was gone. In the silence that followed, only Zarisk spoke. Do not mistake human smiles for submission, he murmured. They're the curve worn by predators who don't need to growl. Behind him, the envelope still sat unopened on the table, marked in plain human script. Break glass in case of existential crisis. And inside it was rumored, lay instructions for how to beg Earth for mercy. If you still had a voice. It had been 23 hours since Ambassador Jack Carson's exit from the Grand Chamber, and the Council's war room hadn't known a moment's peace. The envelope remained unopened. It sat like an unexploded mine on the central table, radiating psychological pressure disproportionate to its paper-thin mass. No one had touched it, not even with a scanner. The suggestion to incinerate it had been met with uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that accompanies faint alarm bells in the brain's oldest, most primal regions. General Bracken stood by the reinforced viewport, arms folded, eyes distant. His spines, usually rigid with command, drooped in a way his subordinates had never seen before. He didn't speak as his senior intelligence advisor, Mecker the hollow-eyed, slithered beside him. Mecker's voice was a constant whisper, like wind through bone. "You seem distracted." Bracken's jaw flexed. "I don't like being made into a fool." Mecker made a dry chittering sound, possibly amusement, possibly indigestion. "You ordered a Class B probe to Earth. It returned intact." "Barely." The memory played back fresh in Bracken's mind. A live feed from a stealth drone launched into Earth's upper atmosphere. It had slipped past primitive satellites, avoided radar pings, adjusted for atmosphere. And then nothing. For 47 minutes, the drone's feed had broadcast silence. Stillness. Until suddenly, inexplicably, it resumed. The camera showed an empty field. A row of human children had assembled nearby, smiling, waving. One held up a sign. "Hi, Galactic Spies." The drone crashed shortly after. No interference. No direct attack. It had simply failed, mechanically, existentially. Like it had been laughed out of the sky. Bracken turned from the viewport, seething. "Explain to me how they knew." No traceable signal. No breach in protocol. "They didn't need a breach," Mecker said. "They were waiting." "That's worse." A side door opened with a polite chime. Jack Carson re-entered the chamber, once again uninvited. Still wearing the same blazer. Still holding the same mug. It might have been the same coffee. Bracken's voice was low and sharp. "You walk into our war chamber again without clearance, and I'll—" Jack held up a small badge. "Oh, you're absolutely allowed to threaten me," Jack said cheerfully. "That's half the fun. But I'd rather you didn't shout. Coffee's hot." Mecker eyed the badge. "That's a level 9 diplomatic override." "Yep," Jack said, sipping. "Took us a while to get into your systems and print it, but I think it's holding up." Bracken hissed through his teeth. "Why are you here?" Jack nodded toward the envelope. "No one's opened it," he said, sounding faintly disappointed. "You wound me." Bracken stormed forward. "Stop playing games, human." Jack's tone didn't shift. "But games are how we survived, General. Hide and seek, chess, poker. The entire Cold War was U.S. playing nuclear chicken. Ever heard of chicken?" Mecker responded cautiously. Terran bird." Jack grinned. "Not that kind. Though they're terrifying too. Ever seen one sprint?" He walked toward the table and finally touched the envelope. He opened it with surgical calm. Inside were 2 items. A single page, handwritten, and a lollipop. Jack held them both up. "Your choice. The paper tells you how to pull back with dignity. The candy is a reward for doing so." Bracken looked ready to rupture something. "You think this is funny?" Jack gave a long, slow shrug. "It's either funny or it's terrifying. Depends on how you take it." He handed the paper to Mecker, who scanned it instantly. His pupils dilated. His throat sack tightened. "This is satellite targeting data," Mecker said slowly. "Our satellites." Jack nodded. "We painted them last week. Took a bit of effort. Time zones. Weather. But your orbital arrays are fragile once you know where to poke." "Why?" Bracken asked, voice quieter now. "Why show your hand?" Jack's smile faded, not entirely, but enough. "Because humans are tired, General. Tired of being underestimated, laughed at, studied, and most of all, tired of cleaning up other species' messes." He placed the lollipop gently back into the envelope. "We aren't the empire builders. Not like you. Not like the Rylix or the hegemony of all. We don't march across stars burning flags into soil." "But you could," Mecker said, almost reverently. Jack said nothing. Mecker looked at the general. "He wants us to understand. Not surrender. Not ally. Understand." Jack raised a finger. "There's a human phrase. Very old. Maybe older than any of your species." He leaned in. "Let sleeping dogs lie." Bracken scoffed. "You're calling your species dogs?" Jack tilted his head thoughtfully. Not all of us. But the part that wakes up when you kick the kennel door? Yeah, that part bites hard. He turned and began walking toward the exit again, slowly. Mecker's voice stopped him. What if we ignore your warning? Jack turned his head slightly, but not enough to see his expression. Then I hope your gods are better listeners than your generals. He left. For several minutes, the chamber was still. Then Bracken turned to Mecker, something raw in his voice. Do you believe him? Mecker didn't answer immediately. His mandibles twitched. Finally he said, we used to believe the Varkai were extinct, until they returned and melted 2 suns. This is different, Bracken said. Humans are chaotic, petty, divided. They can't even govern themselves. Exactly, Mecker replied softly. And still, no one's conquered them. Outside the chamber, Jack walked calmly through the halls of Arcseni Prime's central spire. He paused by a viewing window, gazing out at the stars. Behind him, a soft beep came from his wrist device. A line of text scrolled across the screen. Phase 1 completed. Earth signal echoes confirmed. Probes in place. Jack smiled just faintly. Always test the patience before the perimeter. The device chimed again. A message in bold. Proceed to Phase 2, Whisper Network Engagement. Jack tapped the screen, and the message vanished. A protocol set in motion. Not war, not conquest, but something far more dangerous. Understanding. Back in the chamber, Mecker walked over to the still-glowing, holographic image of Earth. I looked up that phrase, he murmured to himself. Let sleeping dogs lie. He stared at the blue planet for a long time. And we just rang the bell. Far away, across parsecs and politics, Earth remained quiet. Too quiet. Aboard the command bridge of the Zixaran dreadnought Oathkeeper's Fong, a strange hush settled. Captain Velfax, scaled and regal in her obsidian carapace, stood before a glimmering display of incoming telemetry. The Galactic Council had dispatched her vessel, flagship of the Outer Arm Enforcement Fleet, to Earth's orbit. The mission was simple. Observe, collect atmospheric samples, and project strength. A prelude to potential conquest. A show of dominance. Except, none of it was going according to plan. First, the data streams had been corrupted. Not scrambled. Corrupted. Which meant someone had rewritten the telemetry mid-transmission, injecting false atmospheric readings and population stats that fluctuated randomly every hour. At one point, the system claimed Earth housed 17 billion armed gorillas. Another hour later, it listed the dominant species as clown demons. The crew assumed a malfunction. Then came the smell. Somewhere within the ship's filtration systems, the aroma of toasted cinnamon and engine grease began circulating. No one could trace its source. No one had uploaded the scent into the environment simulators. It simply appeared. Velfax had just begun a systems check when the comms officer shrieked. Ma'am, we've received a transmission. From Earth, she asked, straightening. Yes, but not on a secured frequency. It's using entertainment spectrum. Analog. 96.9 megahertz. Velfax narrowed her eyes. Play it. A moment later, static gave way to music. A warbling, brassy tune, followed by a human voice. Welcome, alien visitors. This is Radio Earth, broadcasting live from somewhere you'll never find. Please don't invade. We're busy. Also, you really don't want to see what we do to uninvited guests. There was laughter in the background. Not cruel. Casual. As if someone had hacked their systems and was throwing a party on the other end. Velfax clenched her fists. Is this a taunt? The communications officer looked bewildered. I think it's a greeting. Possibly both. The music switched to an Earth song titled Highway to Hell. Velfax turned to her first officer. Summon the envoy. Moments later, Jack Carson stepped onto the bridge with all the fanfare of a man entering a coffee shop 10 minutes late. He wore a baseball cap now, pulled low over his brow, and carried a different mug, this one emblazoned with the words world's okayest ambassador. Lovely vessel, he said cheerfully. Very murdery. Intimidating. Great lighting. Velfax pointed at the speakers. What is this transmission? Jack glanced at the nearest console. Oh, that? Just our way of letting you know we see you. Earth likes to say hi with music and mild sarcasm. You jammed our systems with pop culture, she hissed. Not jammed. Gifted, Jack corrected. It's not an attack if you smile while doing it. Velthax's temper threatened to boil. You're mocking us. Jack sipped. Not at all. You're very impressive. Big ship, sharp fangs, plenty of guns. Honestly, you guys nailed the aesthetic. You'd fit right into our science fiction conventions. He tapped a finger on the console and added helpfully, just don't wear red shirts if you beam down. Velthax's mandibles clicked in agitation. We came to observe peacefully. Your interference jeopardizes that intent. Funny, Jack said, suddenly more serious, because the last time someone said that, they left Earth in pieces. Bits of them are still orbiting Neptune. Beautiful debris pattern, really. She studied him now, not as an annoyance, but as something else entirely. You act like you're harmless. But nothing about your people's response has been proportional. Jack's smile dimmed, but didn't vanish. Because humans don't believe in proportion when survival's at stake. We believe in overkill. It's our love language. He walked closer to the viewport, staring out at the swirling blue and white sphere below. You want to understand Earth, he said softly. Here's a metaphor. You see a house with no fence. Toys scattered on the lawn. Curtains open. No locks on the windows. It looks defenseless. But when you step inside, you find tripwires under the rug, a shotgun over the fireplace, and an old lady on the porch with a sniper rifle and arthritis, so bad she can't blink, so she never has to stop aiming. Velthax tilted her head. That's a very specific example. Jack nodded solemnly. We call her Nana Ruth. There was silence on the bridge. Jack continued, voice smooth. Your people look for military infrastructure, orbital cannons, shield networks. We hide ours inside things you'd never suspect. Stock markets, weather apps, children's cartoons. If you can see it, we probably don't care about losing it. It's the invisible stuff you should worry about. You bluff, Velthax said. But it sounded less like a statement and more like a question. Jack turned to her fully, setting his mug down gently on the helm console. You remember the Rixie incursion 5 years ago, he asked. Velthax nodded. They vanished en route to Earth. Hyperlane collapse. Jack shook his head. No. Hyperlane override. We lured them into it, fed them fake NAV coordinates, then folded space behind them like closing a curtain. That's impossible. Your species didn't invent it, Jack admitted. But we borrowed some notes, improved them. Velthax took a slow step back. You're more dangerous than you appear. We're polite predators, Jack said softly. The worst kind. We'll shake your hand with one and poison your drink with the other. And you'll thank us because the poison tastes like cinnamon. Why hide it? Jack raised his eyebrows. Because a visible threat draws fire. A quiet one survives. Earth has made itself look weak for centuries because it keeps the monsters looking elsewhere. He retrieved his mug again. Now you're here. You've poked the bear. And the bear didn't swat you. It just offered you tea. Velthax turned to her crew. Begin departure sequence. The bridge stiffened. Ma'am, the helmsman asked. Now. Jack smiled again. Smart. Tell your council, she said, voice low and solemn, that Zixara withdraws its support from the offensive. Earth is not what we thought. I'll let them know, Jack replied. Oh, and leave the cinnamon thing. That wasn't a virus. That's just our flavor signature. You'll miss it. The bridge dimmed as the stars stretched into motion, the ship slipping out of orbit. Earth shrank in the viewport. Peacefully, deceptively. Jack stood alone for a moment, watching it fade. His comm device buzzed. A human voice, Carson. Phase 2 confirmed. They're backing off. Jack's voice was calm. Good. One fleet down. Several more to go. The device crackled. You think they'll keep testing us? Oh, Jack murmured, they always do. Far below on Earth's surface, a small antenna blinked green from the rooftop of a donut shop in Kansas. Beside it, a teenager scrolled through alien transmission data on a hacked laptop, munching powdered pastries, and humming along to the latest broadcast of Radio Earth. Predators, indeed. Stars flickered like uncertain eyes in the void as the Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session aboard the Sovereign Lattice, a megastructure that drifted just outside Council-controlled space. Its interior, a sprawl of crystalline chambers and gravitic throne spheres, now hummed with barely contained panic. Delegates hissed, clicked, pulsed, and thumped as whispers became shouts, and assumptions crumbled beneath them. For the first time in 3 galactic centuries, no one knew what humanity would do next. Jack Carson stood at the center of it all, again uninvited, again unimpressed. No one dared throw him out. He wore the same worn blazer, carried the same chipped coffee mug, but something in his posture had shifted. Straighter now, like the act was over. He didn't smile this time. "You summoned me," Jack said flatly, gazing at the collection of alien empires assembled like children around a table they thought they controlled. "What's the emergency?" No one answered right away, until Admiral Raznex, a bone-thin creature of laced sinew and deep space frost, hissed, "One of our antimatter depots in the Arkan Vale detonated last night. Completely erased. No warning. No trace." Jack tilted his head. Was it insured? Another delegate, bloated and gelatinous, thumped the chamber floor with a tendril. "Don't play games. We intercepted a low-band Earth signal from the area just before it happened. A human joke. Knock knock." Then boom. Jack blinked. "You intercepted that?" "It was directed at us," the delegate insisted. Jack chuckled softly. "No. It was a test. A knock, if you will. We were waiting to see who'd answer." Counselor Threns, a feathered elder with sapphire talons, leaned forward from her perch. "You're escalating. Quietly. Relentlessly." Jack nodded. "That's the thing about escalation. You only notice when you're already at the top of the stairs." The chamber lights dimmed. Without prompt, the war room display spun to life, illuminating real-time updates across the galaxy. Supply routes flickering offline. Surveillance stations on the blink. Planetary databases wiped mid-update. "We've lost visibility," muttered one of the tactical AI proxies. "Of course you have," Jack said gently. "You looked at Earth and saw a Stone Age zoo. But we looked at you and saw an opportunity. You're destabilizing interstellar infrastructure." Admiral Raznex snapped. "This is an act of war." "No," Jack replied calmly. "This is an act of demonstration." He tapped his wristband. A hologram burst to life in the center of the room, a detailed 3D rendering of the entire Galactic Council's private defense network. "You spent millennia perfecting offense, dreadnoughts, orbital lances, fleet-busting singularity rounds. But you never thought to encrypt your own backyard." The hologram rotated, then fractured. One by one, systems winked red. "We didn't disable anything," Jack said. "Yet. But we wanted to prove we could. That's different, you see. We're not attacking. We're politely asking you to think twice." Counselor Threns narrowed her eyes. "What do you want, human?" Jack smiled then, slow and thin. "We want to be left alone." There was silence. Then, "You expect the Council to retreat out of fear?" "No," Jack said. "I expect you to realize fear is inefficient. Respect lasts longer." Zarisk, the old war veteran, stepped forward. He had remained silent until now, hunched in the shadows near the chamber edge. His voice, when it came, was low and brittle. "You used to scare us by being unpredictable," he said to Jack. "Now you scare us because you're deliberate. That's new. That's worse." Jack gave him a polite nod. "We've learned." Raznex's voice was sharp with desperation. "You've weaponized your chaos. That's not evolution. That's madness." Jack turned to him, quiet and cool. "No. That's what happens when you spend 100 years being underestimated. We didn't evolve to be monsters. We trained to be them. Patiently, subtly, while you laughed at our lack of fleets and our old chemical weapons." He took another sip of coffee, as if discussing the weather. "You should have kept laughing." A low alert echoed through the chamber, a signal from the edge of Council territory. Threns tapped a feathered claw to her neural input. Her voice trembled. "One of our outer colonies just received an unauthorized Earth transmission." The display lit up. It was a human child, no more than 6, maybe 7, standing on a playground, looking directly at the camera. She waved. Behind her, carved into the sandbox in massive block letters, were the words, "We see you." There was no sound, only wind, and faint laughter. Jack didn't flinch. "You set this up?" Raznex demanded. Jack shrugged. "We didn't set anything. We just left the lights on and waited for someone to peek through the window." Thren stared at him. "Your planet has no central leadership, no singular doctrine. How are you coordinating this?" Jack's eyes flicked to her. "We're not. Not in the way you understand it. You think you need order to make war. But Earth doesn't need to unify to strike. It just needs to be angry." He stepped toward the projection of the galaxy, tracing a finger through the spirals. "We are not a hive. We are not a council. We are not a machine. We are a storm." Another alert. This time, the chamber lights dimmed without warning. Emergency systems kicked on. A console blinked red. Audio streamed in an open comm line from a council relay station. A voice crackled through. "This is Echo 13. We just received a message from Earth. Not sure if it's code. Transmitting now." Static, then a recording. A human voice, older. Male. "Calm. You came looking for weakness. That was your first mistake. You stayed when you saw none. That was your last." The transmission ended. Velthax, now patched into the council via holoproxy, said nothing. She merely looked at Jack. "Why didn't you just destroy us?" she asked quietly. Jack's expression softened, just slightly. "Because destruction is easy. Fear is forgettable. But doubt? Doubt festers. Doubt gets passed down. Through blood. Through books. Through bedtime stories told in whispers." He stepped forward, slowly now, his words deliberate. "Earth doesn't want your worlds. Doesn't need your resources. We don't dream of empires. But we remember." Another flick of his wrist. Another hologram. This one of an old Earth battlefield. Not from space. Just humans. Muddied. Bleeding. Laughing in the middle of carnage. Carrying their wounded with one arm while aiming with the other. "Every corner of our history teaches one thing," Jack said. "We are dangerous not because we're mighty, but because we are relentless." He looked each delegate in the eye. "We lose. Constantly. And we learn. Instantly. You've seen us when we're unprepared. You've never seen us ready." A pause. Then a whisper from one of the youngest council aides, barely audible. "What happens if Earth decides to attack?" Jack turned to him, and this time his voice was almost kind. "Then you'll understand why the stars haven't been laughing." There was no more yelling, no more threats. The council called a recess within the hour. Jack exited the chamber without fanfare, his presence echoing long after he left. Outside, his shuttle waited. A standard-issue Terran diplomatic vessel, small, unthreatening, and 10 times more heavily armed than it looked. As the hatch closed behind him, Jack settled into his seat and pulled a small chip from his pocket. He slipped it into the console. The display lit up with a new message. "Phase 3 complete. Galactic Council in stalemate. Proceed to stasis protocol." Jack's eye drained now. The part of him that smiled and joked had slipped back into its cage. He tapped the final command. "Project checkmate, sealed." His comm buzzed. A human voice came through. "Carson, debrief." He closed his eyes briefly. "We did it. We convinced a dozen species that the last thing they ever want is a human with nothing left to lose." "And the council? They're going to tell ghost stories about us for the next 1,000 years." He leaned back, finally letting the weight of it settle. He hadn't fired a single weapon. He hadn't needed to. Earth had won a war no one declared by proving it never needed to fight at all. Above him, the stars spun on, brilliant, cold, and watching. And now they knew better.